Interesting.
This race was shorter this year, right?
It was. Yep. And that's one thing I was really concerned about going into the race. Due to COVID and us trying to be conscientious of the native villages and the remote towns that we travel through along the race, and not wanting to spread any COVID out there, because it's not just the mushers traveling. There's the whole race support staff and like the checkers and the officials. As a musher, we don't have a support staff. But when we get to a checkpoint, there's volunteers that, place the food drop bags and the straw for the dogs and put it in a big pile. And they're going to take our time when we arrive. There's a huge vet staff that's caring for the dogs. Again, not really caring for the dogs. They can't help us do massages. But if I have a dog that has an issue or I'm concerned, or they just do a vet exam at every checkpoint just because, and I choose to leave one of those dogs behind, those vets are the ones that are going to be taking care of that dog for me for the next day or two until they can fly it back to Anchorage, and then it's returned to my kennel. But my team goes on with one less dog. And that's why maintaining a healthy team is so important, is you don't get replacements. So anyway, they did opt to go to the halfway point essentially and turn around and go back the same way that they came, which kept us in some more remote parts of Alaska, kept us away from the villages on the Yukon River and on the Bering Sea coast. And it resulted in a race that was a little more than 120 miles shorter than is typical for the Iditarod.
And you were sleeping outdoors this year, right?
Yeah, we already camp outside a lot. I stop in some portion of the checkpoints, but not all the checkpoints. I view the checkpoints as resupply depots. So when I arrive in a checkpoint, the vets are going to do a quick examination on the dogs. This is if I'm just continuing down the trail. I will go get my food supply bags that I filled up and sent out 2 weeks prior to the race. I'll get out the food that I need for the dogs, the food that I need for myself, new booties for the dogs' feet, fuel to cook for the dogs. If I'm going to camp out on the trail, I'll bring a bunch of straw that we use for bedding for the dogs to get them up off the snow and ice when they're resting. I'll load that into my sled and continue down the trail and camp out somewhere on the trail. If we stop at a checkpoint, of course, those amenities are there. And this year they did have some Arctic oven type tents set up. It's basically a large heated tent. And that was really nice. I didn't take advantage of those in too many places. I think I only slept in one once the whole way as far as those tents were concerned. Other places like McGrath is a larger town, and they had a small aircraft hangar available for us. So just a large building with, kind of mats thrown on the floor. So there's different accommodations depending on where you're at.
When you set up in this, I picture the Iditarod being like kind of like old school baseball, where there's like 9 guys who take it very seriously, so they set every record, and then you got the other guys who have like day jobs, and they're just lucky to be there. When you're racing, how many people are you like, all right, this is my competition? Is it like the whole group? Are they all elite racers?
No, well, yes and no. I mean, by virtue of being at the Iditarod, I would say that it puts them in the top, few percentile of the sport. But certainly within that, there are people that know, okay, I have a realistic chance at winning the Iditarod. And there's a lot of people that their best case scenario is finishing the race. Or, we see very commonly people trying to break into the top 20, which are like the paying positions. And that's a mark of a very successful race. If you're a racer that's finished in the top 20 of the Iditarod, you're a serious racer, right? You have a very nice dog team. You put in the time. You know how to develop that team. You're running a professional kennel, and that's probably what you do for a profession. Perhaps in the summer season, you're working tourism or commercial fishing or something where in the summer season, you're able to make enough money to then devote your entire winter to racing. It's not common for somebody to be in the top 20 and they're, working a 9-to-5 job all winter long. You're not going to see that, I don't think, at least not commonly.
What's the qualification process?
The qualifications for the race, for the Iditarod, are primarily about proving you're competent with a dog team, that you're able to travel sustainably with a dog team while keeping yourself and those dogs in superb health. So the qualifications are not so much about competitive qualifications, not yet. I think you have to do 2 300-mile races and 1 200-mile race. Now, with that, we do have like a report card system. So I have a couple handlers here at the kennel that were getting qualified or starting to do their qualifying races this winter. So when they signed up for these mid-distance races, as we call them, they have to inform the race that they want to utilize this race as a qualifying race for the Iditarod. Now, during the race, there are the race officials and the vets that are basically grading them throughout the process. So even if you finish that race and they said, yeah, you finished, but you were not handling sleep deprivation well, or your dogs lost a little bit of weight more than they should have in a 300-mile span, then you're going to get a subpar grade. And the Iditarod, they don't have to accept you just because you accomplish these races. So you apply to sign up for the Iditarod. They look at your qualifications and they say, yeah, all right, you've done 5 300-mile races, but you haven't gotten 3 of these things with A+ report cards. So we'll tentatively accept your application, but we want to see you accomplish 1 more mid-distance race with an A+ grade. Or they'll say, you're not qualified yet. Do more mid-distance racing. Make sure that you're ready to take on this challenge, because it's a serious thing. When you're out there on the trail, it's not like you can just get out your cell phone and say, come help me, and there'll be somebody in 10 minutes. That's not how it works.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I've seen some highlights of there was one lady who was a racer who broke her back taking a turn a few years ago, and I think she had like a 4-year break before she could come back. It seems like no joke.
There's been some serious injuries out there, to say the least. Just this year, one of my favorite people to race with, a musher that I respect quite a lot, Ali Zirkle, was running her final Iditarod. She was second in the race 3 years in a row. The first year that I won the Iditarod, she finished second, less than an hour behind me. The following year, my dad won the Iditarod, because my dad's was my arch rival through most of my racing career.
Yep,
and then again, she was second place, about 40 minutes behind him. The next year, I won my second Iditarod, and she finished 2 minutes and 22 seconds behind me. So I'm a very top contender. And she tipped over going into a checkpoint fairly early in the race on some glare ice. It was a very treacherous trail. I think she may have broke her collarbone or did something on her shoulder or upper body and had a very serious concussion. She was able to make it to the next checkpoint under her own power, but then was, air rescued out of there with a Blackhawk. So, and that's one of the best mushers in the world.
Right.
So sometimes it's just bad luck. It's not a skill thing. It's just bad luck.
Yeah, I keep hearing her name and all the things that I watch or read. It's like you, your dad, her, and then Jeff King. Is that his name? Is that
wrong?
King?
Jeff King. He's a top
I like the way you said it on Jeff.
I couldn't remember. Couldn't remember. But you said
so don't hate me. I just think of him as King Joffrey just because it's more fun that way.
Yeah. So whenever you say
Jeff King, he's a great contender. And then Martin Boozer is another 4-time Iditarod champion that was in this year's race.
So because this is what I'm kind of trying to figure out, because you guys all at the start, it's not like a stuttered race type thing. So you're not racing off of time. Are you racing? Does everybody start at the same exact time?
Yes and no, once again. So we start in 2-minute intervals. So it is spread out just a little bit in the beginning. Fortunately, the first, let's say, 100 miles of the Iditarod Trail is very easy to pass other teams. The first 60 or 70 miles, you're on a river that's wide open, and it's very easy to pass teams. So the teams start to sort themselves out. The starting position is selected on a random draw. Now, during the race, we have a mandatory 24-hour layover. We have to stop down for a complete day. Now, truly, the only person that truly has a 24-hour layover is the last person to leave the starting line. The person that left 2 minutes ahead of them has 24 hours and 2 minutes. The next person in front of them, 24 hours and 4 minutes. So my mandatory rest, I think, was 24 hours and 50 minutes this year. And that way we're all even on the timeline once we leave that mandatory stop. So from that point on, we are racing each other. And when you approach the finish line, if you're ahead of somebody, you are ahead of them. It's not possible for you to finish and then come in 3 minutes later and actually be ahead of you based on time.
Right.
Yeah.
And in that 24 hours, are you just working on your sled the whole time?
Hopefully not. Hopefully things are in good repair. And but if you take a spill and break some stuff, then that's what you'll probably be spending your time doing. That's one of the few places that me as a human gets any significant sleep, because I am the only person that can do anything for my equipment, for my dogs, for anything. So when I stop the dogs for, let's say, a 4-hour break, I'm going to be doing good to get a 45-minute nap for myself during that period. If I stop for a 3-hour break, which I did quite a lot of this year, I'm not sleeping. I'm going to be hustling just to get everything done. By the time I get the dogs fed and bedded down and get their shoes off, put the straw beds down for them, cook them their meal, put the ointment on their feet, do any massages I need to do, make sure they have their jackets on. Then I turn my attention to repacking the sled for the next run, any minor repairs, putting new plastic on the bottom of the runner so that it's slick and it's easy for the dogs to pull. By the time I get done with that, it's time to put new booties on the dog's feet, put them back into kind of mushing formation and get out of there. So the 24-hour break is an important one for the human to get some sleep. Otherwise, you're going to truly be going 7 to 9 days. This trail was shorter, so it was 7.5 days. But traditionally, we would say 8.5 to 9.5 days for a winning team.